There were crowds of people who wanted to be your apprentice, but you chose the one person who didn't care. Well, they don't care for power, so they want to abuse it. Dude, Jim exclaimed, how can you be so calm right now? Tim shrugged. I just don't see why everyone's making such a big fuss about it. This guy is a legend. He's literally mentioned in ancient myths. He was in hiding for 1,000 years, and he suddenly shows up and announces that he's choosing an apprentice. He's the greatest wizard the world has ever known. That is why everyone is making a big fuss about it. I don't know, Jim, it doesn't sound very. What? You don't believe in magic? Did you not watch the broadcast of his announcement? Jim was losing his mind over this. How could Tim be so indifferent? This was the news of a lifetime. It's not that, Tim said. I just don't think it sounds all that great. I'm happy just the way things are. You wouldn't want to have that kind of power? You wouldn't want to study magic under the greatest magician who ever lived? Not really, Tim said. I mean, I guess it could be cool, but I don't need it. Well, I hope you'll at least come watch me get selected as his apprentice at the event this evening. Everyone will be there. Oh, I know, he smiled. I'll be there helping my mom sell snacks and drinks to the crowd. Tim and his mother showed up long before anyone else. They established a little base of operations with their stock of supplies and divided the area into zones they would rotate through. Tim was preparing to enter an apprenticeship with a family friend who would teach him to be a blacksmith, but he couldn't start until he was of age in another few months. Jim hitched a ride with them, wanting to be early, even though there wasn't any advantage to showing up before everyone else. Before long, people began trickling into the massive town square. People brought things to sit on and faced toward the Grand Hall, a building that sat at the north end of the square and towered over any other building in the city. All major events were held here, and the officials always made announcements from a third-floor balcony overlooking the square. Tim and his mother got to work selling their goods. There was a busy, jittery energy in the square, and people were quick to part with their money. After all, they wouldn't need their money if they were selected as the wizard's new apprentice. Just as the last rays of the sun streaked across the sky, a cheer rose from the crowd as the great wizard walked out onto the balcony. No theatrics this time. The whole crowd turned their attention to the balcony. It was useless trying to sell anything now, so Tim found a place to stand out of the way and watched with everyone else. The Grand Wizard's voice carried through the air like thunder, washing over the crowd with power and majesty. Tonight I will choose my apprentice. He held up a pendant. It was a plain-looking gold pot with an emerald gemstone hanging from a dark blue ribbon. He released it and it hung in the air, the ribbon slowly rippling and waving like a lazy serpent. It drifted out over the crowd, slowly, dramatically tumbling and twisting in the air. The wizard scanned the crowd, his eyes burning a wandering path around the square. He froze a couple times, peering intensely through squinted eyes as his floating pendant began drifting toward the one being examined. But each time he would eventually break his gaze and the pendant would float to a halt, waiting. This went on for some time. Each targeted individual's hopes would swell as the pendant drifted closer and closer, and their countenance would fall when they lost the wizard's focus. Many faces lit up and sank into shadow as the pendant meandered high above their heads. Tim decided to try selling more snacks. It was getting boring. But as he wandered through the crowd, he couldn't find anyone who would allow their eyes to stray from the balcony. They all looked on with hope and determination. Tim rolled his eyes and made his way back to the little headquarters he and his mom had set up. Maybe he could stock up and prepare for after the apprentice had been chosen. Surely a lot of disappointed people would want to snack away their sadness. As he walked toward the back of the square, Tim suddenly felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. A warm burning sensation assaulted him from behind, as though a great bonfire had just been lit behind him. He turned and felt his heart leap when he saw that the wizard was peering at him and pointing. He hadn't pointed at anyone before. He had a fierce smirk on his face and his eyes were twinkling. The pendant's ribbon passed around Tim's head and settled on his shoulders, the heavy gold resting gently on his chest. What? He whispered to himself. No. He looked at the wizard, confused, maybe even a little angry. No, he was furious. He didn't want this. The crowd cheered and the wizard turned and walked back into the building silently. A city official pushed her way through the crowd and approached Tim. Congratulations, she said. Come with me so we can make the arrangements for you two. Tim cut her off. There's been a mistake, he said. I wasn't here hoping to be selected, I was just selling snacks. I probably should have stayed home. You don't want to be the wizard's apprentice? She asked, dumbfounded. No. Tim exclaimed. Oh, she said. Well, come with me. She led him to a side door near the balcony where the wizard had stood moments before and led him to a neat little space with comfortable chairs. Have a seat. I'll be back in a moment, she said. She disappeared around a corner, her shoes clacking on the hard marble, sending hollow echoes through the cold, cavernous building. A long time passed. Tim was growing tired. He'd need to be up early in the morning to help his mother with chores before going to school. Eventually, the woman returned, but Tim's heart jumped when he saw that the wizard was with her. He shot to his feet with empty lungs and clammy hands. Tim, the wizard began. I am excited to begin our apprenticeship, but Mary tells me you don't want to be my apprentice. That's right, Tim said. Tim, you were the only one in the entire crowd who didn't want to be my apprentice. Tim froze. How could he know that? He chuckled, surely that can't be true. The wizard looked at him with a raised eyebrow. I mean, I guess. I don't know. I just don't really care. I'm fine with the life I already have laid out for me. You don't want all the power that I can give you? Not really, Tim said. The wizard hunched over, his face close to Tim's, put a bony hand on the boy's shoulder, and lowered his voice. That is why I chose you, Tim. Tim stood there silently looking at his feet while his heart thumped loudly. After a long while he looked up at the wizard, speechless. We begin tomorrow, the wizard said. He patted Tim on the head and turned to leave. Meet me in the town square at dawn. As the wizard and Mary rounded the corner, Tim heard Mary whisper, I don't understand. Her breathy voice bounced around the corners and landed directly in Tim's ears. There were crowds of people who wanted to be your apprentice, but you chose the one person who didn't care. The wizard's deep, gentle voice also reverberated through the great hall and landed directly on Tim's heart. Well, he doesn't care for power, so he won't abuse it.